Sea. A centuries-old shipwreck. A ghost ship. Nobody knows why it went under or what happened to the crew. An expedition sets out to solve the mystery of one of the most intact wooden wrecks ever found. By pushing maritime archaeology to a new frontier, their goal is to make this long-forgotten shipwreck come alive. The story of the ghost ship starts with a lost aeroplane. For 5 years, veteran ocean surveyor Ola Oskarsson leads the search for a Swedish spy plane shot down by the Soviet Union in 1952 at the height of the Cold War. A vast area in the Baltic Sea is surveyed before the aeroplane wreck is finally found and salvaged. But not far from this modern wreck, Ola Oskarsson sees a faint shadow on his screens. He has found a new mystery.
At that moment when I saw it and it stuck in my head, I have seen a very old shipwreck.
Ja, vi är byter vinsch, det är 200 meter.
Yep.
Tack.
Ola Oskarsson returns to the wreck site with a side-scan sonar towed deep down in the water. It emits sound waves, which combine to make an acoustic image of an object on the seafloor.
The aft mast is still standing. The foremast is still standing. The bowsprit is still there.
35 years of surveying has made Ola an expert at interpreting these images.
Look at the shadow. 2 masts standing up, erect, and you see this high aft part of the vessel. All these are leads to a shipwreck standing straight up on the seafloor and being very old. So we can look at that later.
So how old is it? To Johan Rundby, Sweden's leading expert on wooden wrecks, there is little doubt.
Quite soon I had this feeling that this is 17th century and maybe early 17th century. And see that so intact on that depth in the middle of the Baltic, that was really something.
The Baltic Sea is well known for preserving wooden wrecks, and it's been a maritime crossroads for thousands of years. Ships have gone under here in peacetime and in naval battles. In that sense, it is logical that the ghost ship is where it is. The amazing state of conservation comes from a low salt content in the water, which keeps the shipworm away. The most famous example of this is the warship Vasa, which sank in 1628 on its maiden voyage. Raised in 1961, now almost completely restored, it is one of Sweden's most spectacular tourist attractions. Although much larger, it has many features in common with the ghost ship. The main difference is that the Vasa has gun ports. The ghost ship is unarmed, and therefore likely to be a merchant ship. American Fred Hocker is the Director of Research at the Vasa Museum. He is intrigued by the new discovery.
The ghost wreck for me is really exciting because Vasa is what you might say your ultimate expression of a warship in the Baltic in the first half of the 17th century. The ghost wreck is your typical merchant ship of the same period. If we could actually get some time to look at that ship in detail, how much we could learn about the mercantile side, the commercial side of Baltic seafaring, or the seafaring of all of Northern Europe in the 17th century.
It is the first ever merchant ship from this period found intact. Replicas are made from paintings and drawings from the period. The ghost ship could be a key to a whole era of global shipping. But is it really a ship from the 17th century? How did it go under? What happened to the crew? The experts want to find out. But there is a serious hitch. The ghost ship is lying at a depth of 130 meters. Too cold and too dangerous for diving in the Baltic Sea. Ola Oskarsson is keen to take on the challenge. He has a unique experience with sonars and echo sounders for mapping objects on the sea floor. Solving the mystery of the ghost ship is an ideal way of pushing ocean survey technology to the limit.
The shipwrecks is such a good way of driving our technology to the front end because everybody understands the shipwreck and the shipwreck tells the story. So if someone actually can get the story, I think we've done a very good job. That's the driving force.
If the test works, Ola will mount a larger expedition to study the wreck in detail. But finding those details on the bottom of the Baltic Sea is not easy.
The visibility is poor. It's a very dark sea and the sun is not very high on the sky.
To overcome this problem, Ola has designed this rig. It carries more lighting than any diver could. It helps the robots, called remote-operated vehicles, ROVs, work safely without disturbing the wreck site. Even when they penetrate into the wreck. Ola is thrilled with the result.
Kan det lite mer ovanför skallen? Titta upp lite och så går närmare och så rundar du masten och babord ut. Coming down on the deck with the ROV and seeing the figurehead, looking straight into the camera on a very short distance, you felt that this is old. We're actually landing on something that's been untouched for several hundred years, and we're the first to be here. And it was almost like you wanted to say, excuse us for intruding, we want to go back in here. Because it was such a strong presence of people.
For the ultimate test, in a feat of masterly coordination, Ola puts 2 ROVs and a lighting rig behind the wreck. The small ROV homes in on a window in the stern. At first, all it can see is silt. But with the lighting rig in position, suddenly a whole cabin comes into view. A table turned upside down, a bench, a seaman's chest. It looks like the crew left in a hurry. Donovan Griffin, a deep-water archaeologist, is convinced that new technology is the future of his profession.
We stand on a sort of the precipice of a paradigm shift within archaeology. The old guard always assumed that you had to dive a wreck. I think the ROVs will eventually be to the point where we can properly survey these sites.
For Ola, that time is now. The trial has proved that the wreck can be documented in detail, but a full-scale scientific ghost ship expedition will demand even more precision. In preparation, the scientists take a road trip to Holland to see the Batavia, a full-scale replica of a 17th century trading ship.
And some meters narrower, and
It is bigger than the ghost ship, but with similar proportions.
140 centimeters.
A single cabin on the Batavia is larger than a cabin and galley combined on the ghost ship.
Somewhere here. Right. That's quite a small room.
And then the galley.
And the galley should be 2.5 meters from you one. So Here somewhere.
Yeah, about here.
So that's the whole area.
Yeah.
Yeah, so except more like this.
Exactly. And I should stand here and use the fireplace.
Well, this is the 17th century Admiralty ship, the Seven Provinces, which was built originally in 1665. And she's connected...
Arjen Klein heads the construction of 17th century replicas at the Batavia Wharf.
The ship itself was broken up at the end of the 17th century, so we have no remains of the ship itself. But there are...
He too wants to know if the ghost ship really is a Dutch 17th century ship.
Okay, it might be a Dutch-built ship. It has got all the hallmarks of a Dutch-built ship.
What would you like to know that we could find out by studying that ship?
Well, from a technical point of view, all the information to do with the building of the ship, the joints they use, the proportions of the frames, just figure out how she compares to all the Dutch shipbuilding information we already have. Right. And it would be very worthwhile if we could measure up the ghost ship and see if it adheres to these particular tables. Because if this is the case, we know for sure it's a Dutch-built ship.
Most of all, the ghost ship resembles the common Dutch trading ship of this period, known as a fluit. But Ola's first sonar shadow was a long way from being a real match. During the trial, an echo sounder gave only this rough outline of the ghost ship. The scientists demand something much more accurate. Seven years have passed since Ola Oskarsson first saw that faint shadow of a shipwreck. Now his research ship, the Ice Beam, is ready for a full-scale expedition. He makes a bold promise. The ghost ship will be measured in every detail to an accuracy of 1 centimeter. This is the solution. An ROV fitted with an echo sounder. The end result should be an exact 3-dimensional model of the ghost ship in just one expedition. Something that would take divers several years using conventional methods.
I'm really glad you guys came, because we bought this and we thought we should get it mounted, but we got it in a kit like an IKEA kit, so we wanted to start putting it together. We don't know what to do anymore. We're totally lost here.
For the task of filming the inside of the wreck, Ola has found a brand new mini ROV.
That is a micro ROV.
That's amazing. I've never seen one of those.
Not that small.
What does it weigh? Okay. And even if you ran into something with that, you couldn't hurt it.
Not too much.
It's a perfect tool.
The graphic imagery in the video will give the scientists an understanding of the ghost ship's structure. But to get closer to the identity and origin of the ship, they need to bring up objects for analysis. A large wooden sculpture known as a hookman is lying behind the wreck. It was once brightly colored according to the fashion of the day. Color fragments can only be analyzed on the surface.
Press it, hopefully will protect.
You know, I think the padding on that will be fine.
I do too.
Fred Hocker is in charge of the salvage operation. Nobody knows how fragile the sculpture is, so a special cage has been designed to lift it.
The biggest danger for the sculpture is the 120-meter transport through the water. If you get water flow over the surface, it will wash the surface off.
Okay. So it's just okay.
It creates a dead pocket of water with a pressure wave above it, so that there's no water flow around the sculpture while we raise it.
The Ice Beam has left port, steaming northwards off the island of Gotland in the middle of the Baltic Sea. It's almost a full day's journey to the remote location of the mysterious ghost ship. Using the existing video imagery, ghost ship researcher Niklas Eriksson has drawn up a site map. The artwork is invaluable for the expedition. It will help the ROV pilots navigate over the wreck and the scientists pinpoint the most interesting areas in the search for the ship's identity. this ship obviously had a name, but it was not. It was not written in letters on the side of the ship. But the name could be a big figure here or a painting. Actually show the name of the ship.
If you find that the central sculpture on the stern is a big rose, then the name of the ship might have been the Rose.
Sounds easy, but not so on this shipwreck. Where the central sculpture should be sitting, there is a gaping hole. The top part of the stern, called the transom, has fallen off the ship. There are just a few ornaments left.
Different flowers, roses, and then it's some other kind of flower. That's the same as on the rudder.
The missing parts are spread out over the seafloor behind the ship. The group decides to make a detailed video search over this area, and wreck artist Niklas gets a new assignment: to piece together the whole stern and try to make a drawing with the name symbol in its proper place, if that symbol can be identified. The ice beam is now on location. Can modern technology prove that the ghost ship is really a Dutch 17th century merchant ship? A top priority is dating. A diving archaeologist would pick up a few loose pieces of wood. On this expedition, it's a job for the ROV pilots. The wood is divided up for analysis in different laboratories. Ship hulls were made of oak, superstructures made of pine.
I'd say for sure that it's pine.
The technique is known as dendrochronology. If the wood sample has visible year rings, a computer can match these against other wood samples with a known origin. It's a bit like fingerprinting, only here you are looking for a time period and a place of origin. Amazingly, the very first plank brought in for analysis brings a result. Marta Dominguez, a specialist working in a Dutch laboratory, finds a matching dendrochronology curve.
The last measured ring in the sample dates in 1631. I think that it's very likely that this wood is coming from Sweden or south of Scandinavia.
The combined data from different planks suggests that the ghost ship was built sometime in the middle of the 17th century. But the scientists are even more curious to know when the ship went under. Dendrochronology can also help with that question.
The only thing which maybe would be even more interesting is to have some planks from the cargo, because they might be cut very close to the year of the sinking.
In the middle of the 17th century, Dutch ships are seen in all European ports. The Dutch merchant fleet is the largest in the world, numbering around 2,500 ships, with England as the closest rival, with just 180. The Dutch are revolutionizing shipbuilding by building many ships of similar design. The largest yards turn out as many as 50 per year.
These ships are the backbone of the most important trade in Northern Europe. The prosperity of the Netherlands that people tend to associate with the East Indies and the silks and spices trade is really based on shipping timber and dried fish and grain out of the Baltic, for which you needed a ship that could carry large quantities of those cargoes at the lowest possible price.
Economy is the driving force behind the Dutch innovations. Economy of scale by building many ships. Economy on board because they're relatively easy to handle. Crew costs are cut in half compared to earlier ship types. 4 sails are enough to generate a slow but steady pace. Merchant ships from the small Dutch Republic are soon seen all over the world. In a few decades, trading posts open in Asia, Africa, South America. In North America, they established New Amsterdam, later to be renamed New York. Trade brings capital to Holland. The capital is invested in industries and new ships. What follows is an explosion of innovation, construction, art and architecture. It's soon called the Golden Age. The expedition is now gearing up for the big salvage operation, lifting up the Hookman. On the surface, it looks like simple mechanics.
The part I don't know about, because I'm not an ROV driver, is all the hooking and unhooking stuff. It'll hinge on control. Yeah.
Can this be made to work 130 meters down with a fragile wooden sculpture? Putting the cage for the Hookman in place is precision work. The Ice Beam state-of-the-art positioning system is accurate down to a centimeter in calm weather. All it takes is an order from the captain and the push of a button.
Correction, course grade 5. RV bridge. Ship is hybrid. Ship is moving, thank you.
Almost every piece of equipment on the Ice Beam is involved in this complicated operation. The ROVs monitor the lift and activate the claw and cage. The lighting rig is in the way when the sculpture is lifted out of the water. So divers meet up just below the surface to secure the final part of the operation. On Hookman Salvage Day, the Ice Beam is enveloped in fog. The sea is almost flat, a perfect setting for ghost ship archaeology.
Bridge, when will Mama Duck be here? 3 minutes.
The Ice Beam support vessel, lovingly known as Mama Duck, joins in this operation with divers and conservators to make sure the object is safe all the way. Operation is directed from the ROV control room.
Space 10, David Paul under, so I think we're all right here.
To make certain that nothing will get in the way of the claw, Fred decides to play pickup sticks before giving the okay for the lift.
If you can put the claw behind it and pull it back away, that's all we need to do.
This is where the ship's dynamic positioning system is put to its ultimate test.
Decimeters, 0.2 meters, course 180, 180.
180 and 20 centimeters.
Correct.
ROV bridge, we are moving. Thank you. 0.1. ROV bridge is in position.
Okay, thank you.
There are three dangerous moments for the sculpture in the lift. The first is getting it off the bottom. And that's where we've just been preparing the area around it so we will get a clean grab. The next dangerous moment is the lift from the bottom to the surface. And we want to try to minimize water flowing over the surface of it, because that will wash the surface off. And then the third moment, and potentially the most dangerous, is when we go from the water to the air. Once we start that last lift, we can't stop.
Let's try to lift. Can I lift now? I think so. Now we're gonna lift. Yep.
Now you will lift.
This is the lift. Got it.
Ooh, very nice.
Suddenly, the euphoria turns to confusion. There is uncertainty about the size of the sculpture. The cage designed for the lift doesn't seem to measure up.
The other sides aren't even buttoned up against it.
You should also go down and check from the other side.
ROV bridge, ship is in position.
Thank you. We're just gonna make a decision whether it's too big for the cage or not.
Should
Go a little closer.
It's too long.
I don't think so.
The Hookman was measured by laser, but part of the structure was hidden in the silt, and it now looks like the whole sculpture can't fit into the cage. Fred Hocker has reason to worry. A failure now would be a serious setback to the expedition.
The ship is moving. You want it hit?
Ola,
Yeah.
we have consensus here. We don't want to try to stuff it in the box.
Good.
The science team has come to the conclusion that the padded claw has a gentle enough hold on the sculpture. It looks sturdy, unlikely to be harmed by the lift. The decision is to take the sculpture up to the divers and let them secure it for the crucial passage through the surface.
We want to go in one smooth movement. It doesn't have to be fast. It needs to be one smooth movement until it's completely clear of the water.
13 meters below the surface, the divers are waiting for the Hookman. This is the most critical moment of the salvage operation. And in the end, relief mixed with some surprise.
It's bigger than we thought.
A quick inspection confirms that this is an almost life-size male figure in typical 17th century attire.
What kind of condition is this in?
So will the Hookman be able to tell the story of when the ship was built? Fred is convinced that through its design and color scheme, it can.
Paint remains here, down in the crevices, and then we've also noticed there's still paint on the crown of the hat. And it's probably down in all of the crevices. We'll see more paint. And probably have a pretty good idea of the overall color scheme of the sculpture by the time we're done.
The largest piece in the puzzle to recreate the missing part of the ghost ship's stern is now secured. It is carefully wrapped and sent to the mainland for further analysis. Ola's team now turns from mechanics to high-tech. The real challenge is the 3D model that will give the researchers precise details about the size and structure of the wreck. It's time to launch the large ROV with the Echo Sounder. This technology is new to the Baltic Sea, where layers of fresh water and seawater make all kinds of measuring complicated.
Surveying in the Baltic is very hard because the sea is stratified, so you have salt water and fresh water that doesn't mix, so there is lots of levels. So you have to get very close to the shipwrecks to get good pictures.
It's like brain scanning the wreck through the holes and cracks in the main deck. Every run of the ROV adds new reference points. Millions of these points will together create the 3D image.
Previously.
But Ola Oskarsson and computer specialist Mark Crooks keep running into problems. The expected clean picture of the wreck is skewed. There is something wrong with the positioning of the ROV.
So are the markers on the screen, are they wrong?
Those were fixed points that we took with the ROV, but the sketch that we got plots it slightly to the north. So obviously, once we know the position, we can plan the survey lines.
Yeah.
A few odd features on the.
Ola's ambitious goal of providing more data than a diving expedition is in serious doubt. It will, in the end, take days of repair work and months of frustration before he or the scientists know if they can get a 3D model of the wreck. In fact, Ola's expedition plan isn't working at all as he hoped. His real favourite, the mini ROV, is also letting him down. 130 meters of depth is pushing the limit for this tool. The ROV is deformed by the pressure and starts taking in water. Not even their best efforts at sealing the little robot can save this part of the expedition.
I värsta fall så får vi vara nöjda med den.
The scientists need another breakthrough in the search for the identity of the ship. What about that missing name symbol? The ROVs return to the area behind the stern, where there are both wreck parts and rocks. Every new video sequence is passed on to Niklas Eriksson, who is trying to work out how all the decorations on the stern fit together. So far, nothing resembles a name symbol. Suddenly, a large object thought to be a boulder comes into view from a new angle. Surprise, surprise, it has a carving on it. This is good news. Now Niklas can fill out that large empty space in the middle of the transom to to complete his assignment on the expedition.
We are not quite sure that this must be the main sculpture which was attached to the sternum, to the transom. And we can also see that this is a bird body, probably a swan, or quite sure a swan. That means that actually the name Swan was a part of the name of the ship.
Now the expedition is on a roll again, and there is more to come.
Yeah.
The ghost ship is slowly coming alive. It's a 17th century ship with a swan in its name. But what can the wreck tell us about the fate of the crew? The strange sculpted figures called knightheads have long intrigued scientists. Their function is to anchor the rigging, but it is also thought that they have a symbolic meaning as guardians of the ship. If that is the case, it seems as if these knightheads are saying, no, we couldn't help the ship from going under, but if you look carefully at the way the rigging was left, you can work out what happened to the crew.
Ho. Stop and take a good picture of that.
What is that?
That is the halyard block for the topsail, and the fact that it is where it is means very strongly that when the mast went over, the sail was lowered, so that this sail was not set when the ship sank. And the position of the yards may indicate that the crew were handling the situation. They had taken the measures they could take, and something had gone wrong in rough weather.
So there is a chance that the crew survived. Fred wants to test that theory with a full-scale experiment on board a sailing ship. As the ice beam heads home, there is still a lot to do for the members of the ghost ship expedition. Ola needs to work on the 3D model, and the Hookman sculpture is waiting to be analysed. This is the first Hookman salvaged since Vasa 50 years ago. There is nothing to match it, even in Holland, where they were once made in their thousands. Dutch conservator Laura Curler has come to Stockholm to take over the object for a more detailed analysis.
Have you done sculptures before?
No. Little objects. Mostly little objects or complete shipwrecks.
really big objects?
Very big objects or very small objects like spoons, all kind of tools. But no, not a Hookman. This is the first one and it's very unique.
Here there's on the under edge of the hat.
Even with the naked eye, the ghost ship researchers have found a remarkable variety of paint on the sculpture.
It looks like there's some sort of base pigment, like a primer coat, that's reddish color. And I wonder if that's some sort of ground or preservative that's put on before they put the color on.
Yeah, put on the whole statue before the other colors.
I think it looks a lot like what we used to call red lead, which is a lead-based primer pigment. Looks like there's plenty of places where there is paint anyway.
Yeah, also here, black, around the buttons.
Right. Can you see anything else?
Yeah, here some black pipe.
Yeah, that's getting to the edge of where the hair meets the jacket.
Yeah.
That makes sense. There's more of
It now seems that Fred's hope of eventually getting a full colour scheme of the Hookman has a good chance of coming true. The high-tech part of the expedition is also coming together. Painstaking computer work has yielded the first exact 3D model of a shipwreck deep down in the Baltic Sea.
It's quite fascinating because we have all this good video filming inside there.
Yeah.
But now we also get all the measurements. Right. Isn't that fantastic?
Well, and you know one of the things that we can do we can take this model, create a surface model out of that, and then we could paint the video imagery onto the surface model.
Yeah.
If we were diving only, you just did 3 weeks of excavation.
And that's just looking at the exterior. The Echo Sounder has done even more. Beaming through the holes in the weather deck, it has mapped the lower decks and holds. The computer can now slice the wreck backwards and forwards, revealing information a diver would never be able to reach.
I'm just demonstrating what we have here, so I mean, I guess you could play a few hours with this stuff.
Days, weeks, maybe. I'm throwing away my tape measure.
Literally in minutes, Fred Hocker can now calculate the size of the ship. The data from the expedition confirms that the Ghost ship is indeed a fluid, the workhorse of the Dutch trading empire. The 3D model has given the exact dimensions. The cameras have identified all parts of the rigging on the deck and the seafloor. The hookman has provided the colours. And the keen eye of the artist has recreated the whole transom with the name symbol. Ola's expedition has resurrected the Ghost ship, fitted as she was 350 years ago, sailing into the Baltic. One mystery remains. Why did this splendid ship go under, and what happened to the crew? Is it really possible that the Ghost ship crew survived the disaster? Fred Hocker has boarded the Delaware-based Kalmar Nickel, a full-size replica of a 17th century ship, to test his theory. Even in normal weather, a 17th century ship is difficult to handle. This is before the steering wheel was invented. A 17th century ship is steered with a whipstaff, located aft on the ship, one deck above the tiller. A whipstaff helmsman has a very limited view.
It's good here to make sure you're looking out at the horizon so that you can see the ship turning. Sometimes you can use clouds, sometimes there's something on land, can be helpful.
Well, and if you're sailing in the Baltic, there are very few places that you sail that you can't see the land.
The window through which you look, of course, back here is very small, so there's an element of luck as to whether you're looking at land at any given moment.
The Ghost ship has clearly lost all contact with land. A sudden storm could have blown her off course. But the ship has little visible damage. There must be some other reason why the captain decides to abandon the ship.
Maybe she was leaking badly. She was leaking so much they couldn't pump out the water. So and then they stopped the boat and tried to leave it.
We haven't really looked on the downside. I mean, we haven't seen any signs of a big hole, at least.
Well, but we know that one of these two pumps is missing and the other one's broken. But we don't know when that happened. Did any of that happen before the ship sank?
Okay.
Because if they lost lost the pumps,
then they were in trouble.
But it looks like they had enough time to figure it out.
If they did all this rigging stuff.
Right. They've had enough time and enough sense to take the steps you need to do to abandon ship in the middle of the sea.
On board the Kalmar Nickel, Fred has now figured out how this happened, and what the last actions taken by the crew of the Ghost ship were.
They were in trouble, they were in a storm, they needed to stop so they could get the sails down, they could an abandoned ship. What you do is called heaving to, and it's a way to stop the ship, to put on the brakes. So what they're doing right now is they're bracing the mainsails around so that they're no longer full of wind and propelling the ship, but they'll take the wind from the other side, they'll go aback, and that force will cancel out the force of the other sails. It's like slamming on the brakes. And what that allows the ship to do is to stop and then very slowly drift sideways, and makes the ship much more stable. It's much easier to do things like make repairs or to get people into the boats if you have to abandon the ship. And that's probably what they did in the very last hours, or the last hour, or even the last minutes of the Ghost ship. And we can see that from how the remains of the rigging are lying on the bottom of the sea, where all the blocks are, where all the yards are, to give us that clue to the last minutes of that ship's life.
After the heave-to, the bravest sailors climb the rigging to lower the topsails. This gives the crew a chance to pull up the rowboat and get off the sinking ship. From a distance, they can see their ship disappear in the storm. We know that the Ghost ship was lost. It is still standing there 350 years later, a stark reminder of a shipwreck long forgotten. We can only hope that the crew reached land safely, and that their story is recorded somewhere, another chapter that this expedition can bring to life.
Don't miss We Built the Titanic, a brand new series starting on Monday at 8. Stay tuned for